Hello, namaste, everyone. Welcome to Random PhD Talks, where we decode the PhD process abroad, one scholar's journey at a time. I'm Spurti. I'm a third year PhD student at the University of Leeds, doing some exciting research around water supply, gender, and governance. And with me today, I have a good friend and an amazing colleague, Ankit, who's also from India and is in his first year of PhD. But what is interesting is he has an integrated PhD. So he's got a 1 year master's program included in the study, and he's just completed his master's as well. So over to you, Ankit. Welcome to the show, and let's start with your introduction.
Thank you for having me on the show. My name is Ankit. I'm a first year PhD student, like you said. But my journey to PhD has been slightly different compared to a lot of people. So I started my career with a degree in business administration, and then sort of transitioned to the development sector. So I've spent about 14 years working in India's development sector in
Amazing.
different non-profits. And 6 years into my journey of working in the development sector, I came for a master's degree to the UK. So I
Oh, okay.
did an MPhil in Education and International Development at Cambridge in 2016, finished that in 2017, and then went back to India and worked
Yeah.
for another 6 years. And that's when it was sort of broadly during COVID that the idea of a PhD came to my mind, where there was a lot of time to, I guess, sit back and reflect, and we were all sort of confined within our homes at that time. And I think that was the first time that I actually thought about a PhD as an option. So interestingly, when I had come here for my master's, it wasn't on my mind at all. So when I went
Right.
back, I had no intention of coming back here for
Okay.
a research degree. And the idea actually came to me during COVID, where there was sort of time to think back and reflect on, what do I really want to do? And that's when I guess the idea for PhD first came to me.
Right. Oh, that's really nice. And what year was this when you did your master's in the UK?
This is 2016-17. So like 16 end to
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
17.
So about 2.5 years ish, and then COVID, and then you started thinking about the PhD. But what was that point that really drove you to say, okay, now I'm going to do a PhD? Because, like you said, you already had an experience of education in this country, and then you already decided that, okay, you're done. But then something changed, and then you wanted to do this again. So,
So couple of reasons. I think one was having worked in the sector for so many years. There were a lot of things that I had learned, but after a point, I felt like, especially this was especially true for education, where I felt like a lot of NGOs are trying the same thing over and over again. The government is also trying different things, but eventually the outcome is more or less the same. And I felt like rather than doing more of the same, it was necessary to sort of step back and, really explore this issue in detail, because as a practitioner, you often get caught up in, the project management of projects. So you don't not really reflecting on what is happening on the ground. You're just spending a lot of time on writing reports or just delivering a specific project. You're not looking at the education system as a whole. And in some sense, there's also that sense of, I guess, frustration or cynicism that had set in of, I have been working for so many years, and there are people who've worked even longer than me,
yeah.
and they've not really seen a change. So doing more of the same will sort of, it wouldn't really have given me any excitement of
True.
learning new things. But the second reason, I think, was also the political scenario in India, where it was becoming increasingly difficult to ask difficult questions.
True.
And asking difficult questions was a very important part of actually understanding why children in India's classrooms are not learning. And the space to ask those questions or to engage with the government had become very limited, particularly in the last organization that I worked with, Oxfam,
Yeah.
where we were writing a lot of reports on the status of children's education, particularly during COVID.
Right.
and how access to education had been curtailed, but it took a very long time for the government to actually accept those findings and accept, the challenges that children are facing. So the political scenario of not being able to engage with the government or to share the ground reality was also another reason I felt, maybe doing a PhD is one way to sort of take a step back, but also take a break from this, where just, sharing reports with them was not really leading to anything. So I felt a PhD might be a time for me to personally also learn, and take a step back from the toxic sort of political scenario that prevailed.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that honestly, Ankit. I think I very much relate to it as well. I was also in the development sector for more than a decade, and I also hit a bit of saturation. And that's when I was like, I definitely need this space away from the current structure just to think and reflect and make sense of this experience and then find the way forward. So you've covered some really important points about the reasons for doing a PhD. It could be just taking a break for yourself, just reflecting, making sense of everything, and also asking the tough questions, like you said. Great. So what did you do next then? You've decided you want to do a PhD and you have a sector that you're working in already. So what were the next steps that you took?
So the first time that I thought about the PhD properly was 2020. I would say probably September or October.
Right.
And at that time, I was working full time in a very, very intense role. I was doing 10-hour calls a day.
Wow.
And even though I had a bit of a draft proposal ready, I still felt like it wasn't enough. So I thought I'll not apply that year because it needed much more time commitment to do that.
Right.
Then in 21, again, I sort of considered, the possibility of doing that. But again, I was still working full time at the time. Again, it didn't seem like something that I want to do half-heartedly. So I sort of again deferred, did not really apply in 21. It was in 22, I had quit my job, and I actually quit my job with the intention of applying for the PhD full time, which was a big risk in a sense, but I wouldn't call it a risk necessarily because I had the privilege of having some savings and not having to support my family. So that might not be possible for everyone, but that's a call that I took because I wanted to do this full time. So it was around, I think, in 2022 August, I started writing my proposal. That's the first thing that I started with. I had some rough draft ready from the previous years, and I just worked on that, and then sort of shared that with multiple people. So this included people that I worked with, friends, family, also my ex-supervisor at Cambridge who I worked with previously. And then based on all of that feedback, I did multiple rounds of edits to the proposal.
Got it.
And then started sort of circulating that to different departments, to different universities in the UK. And before that, what I did was, once I had the proposal ready, I looked through the different universities that I wanted to apply to and looked through all the departments, looked at what different people were doing, and then created a short list of potential supervisors. And then I started writing emails to those supervisors with sort of requesting them about my interest in the topic and whether they would be interested to supervise me.
Great. Amazing. I think just the fact that you've spent more than 2 years in just taking that first step, applying, I think that's really commendable. And what would you say as a tip? Is it okay to just apply right now? Because it does take a long time, right? If I'm starting this application this October and I know I'm not really happy with my proposal, but I just want to apply because I want to start next year, like you said, not fully developed proposal. So is it still okay to just apply, test the waters, or it's okay to defer another year, give it your all, make it your 100%, and then start approaching? What would you say is the difference between the two approaches?
I think personally, at least the approach that I would take is probably take some time off, because the proposal is one aspect of it. There are people who probably don't have fully developed proposals who might still get admission, but the second aspect of it is scholarships.
Right.
And a lot of scholarship deadlines are very early.
Mm.
And even though the university might give you an admit, the scholarship might have stricter criteria when it comes to the proposal itself.
Right.
And you would need to dedicate a lot of time in having your references ready, in having your SOPs ready. So I think it's the scholarship aspect of it which actually also requires you to put in a lot of time and do it well in advance.
Right.
And if one wants to get funding, I would say giving it your all is probably a better bet. But I must sort of be honest to say that even after all of these processes, there are a lot of factors that are not in your control.
Yeah.
So you could have a very good proposal, you could have supervisors who agree to take you on board, the university might give you an admit, but funding they also depends on what the priority for that year is, whether India is a priority country for the funder that year, or whether the topic that you're working on
Right.
is a strategic priority for the funder. So, I mean, I would highlight that you could do everything in your power to get through, but there are factors
Right.
beyond your control, and that's something one I think should be prepared for
Right.
before you go through the process.
Right. No, that's really helpful. But if I was applying, where would I then get this information about these factors that are not in my control? Like if India is being funded this year, or if these topics are funded, or is this something that I should not worry about?
I don't think you can worry about it, and I don't think you can even get the information to a
Okay.
great extent. I mean, there was just a couple of pieces of information that I was able to find in the public domain. For example, the Cambridge Trust had a list of countries that they funded, the list of
Oh,
scholarships per country.
Right.
And interestingly, I saw that China had one of the highest scholarships, but also US had more scholarships than India.
Oh, wow.
Which is fairly interesting given that
Yeah.
it's much more economically advanced country and probably needs funding less than India does.
Yeah.
But then there are those factors, but also that it changes from year to year.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think that's something that one can worry about potentially. There could be, broader things that you might see in the public domain, like for example, something like climate change.
Yes.
Is something that you see, for example, the UK government talking about at the global scale.
Yeah.
You just had the COP. So there are some topics that if you keep an eye out, will always be strategic priorities to some extent.
Yeah.
And maybe if your topic is already in that direction, it might make sense to align it. So there are some topics which potentially you could argue would stand a better chance. But other than that, I think it would be very difficult to make the prediction. There's just one thing I wanted to add about the financials, and I think this is particularly for people who are doing the 1+3 program. So with regard to the visa in the 1+3 program, because the first year is a master's, the way it works is you get the visa only for the duration of your master's. So you get it for about 1 year and 3 months. And for that, I paid about £1,200. So the challenge is that once you finish your master's, you need to reapply for a visa for your PhD, because in the 1+3, the master's is a precondition for the PhD.
Right.
So you actually get an unconditional PhD offer after you finish the master's degree. And the challenge with that is, because visa fees change every year, you actually are at risk of ending up paying much more. So in the year that I graduated last year with my master's, at that time, the IHS fees increased by 66%.
Oh my God.
So I was due to pay much more than I would have if I was doing a regular PhD program, where I would have paid the IHS fees at the lower rates. But I think one sort of good thing that came out of this, or which at least made me a little hopeful about universities here is that I and three other international students were affected by this in ESRC, were ESRC funded. And we raised this issue with our course convener, then with the department, and they were able to actually arrange a meeting with the pro vice chancellor, and where we put across this issue. And one of the students actually said that the additional cost, she would have be at risk of dropping out of the program because of having to bear the additional cost. And we did a detailed calculation of the additional cost that we were being asked to pay unfairly, which UK students who are on the same scholarship don't have to pay.
Right.
So I, to be honest, was not sure that this would result in anything, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that the university actually took up this issue, and
Amazing.
They agreed to fund £1,600 to all the international students to
Amazing.
make up for the increase in visa fees.
Wow.
So that was one good development that came about that, and I think what I would tell everyone is, if there are issues that you're facing once you're doing a PhD, I think you should raise it through the proper channels. I would say don't assume that nothing is going to work. And if other people are facing it, probably, do it as a group. I think there is strength in numbers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, yeah, that did help sort of reduce some financial strain in paying the visa fees for the PhD. But I still had to pay a little over £4,000 then for the new visa fees. So I think any savings that I would have managed in this time were sort of wiped out in one go.
Oh my God. So I think overall you spent more than £5,000, right, for your masters in this, about 5,500.
Yes.
And you started in 2023.
Yes.
I started in 2022, and I think I spent a bit under £3,000. So just a year's difference is almost like £1,500. I think this is, and also the process itself could have been so nightmarish, right? So you'll have a new CAS number, and then you'll have to redo all of that. So after masters, do you have to go back to India and apply all of this from India, or can someone continue staying here and just apply from here?
No, you can continue staying here and apply from here. That's what I did. The only thing is one needs to move quickly, because you officially finish your course in September, but the university doesn't get back to you with results till October. So what I did was I reached out to my course convener and the scholarships in charge and requested them to share a letter which basically the letter said highly likely to succeed. So even though the formal result had not come in based on my results and the other assignments, they gave me a letter saying I'm highly likely to succeed, which is what I used for the visa application. Because if you wait till the final result comes out, it might be a little tight. Because my PRP was expiring on 31st December. So I wanted to apply quickly. So that's the process that I did. So it was a little nightmarish, I wouldn't admit, having to go through the whole visa process on a tight timeline. And I don't have really any advice except being prepared for it and doing it well in advance.
No, I think you raised a very valid point about this entire e-visa. So just for those who don't know, there was a physical card called BRP. It was a residence permit, and that is like a substitute for visa that we usually showed. But the physical one expired on 31st December 2024 for everyone, and they shifted all of it to something called e-visa. And there was not much information there, I remember, because I also had some issues with it. And whenever I try and call the free toll lines or anything, there's no access to anybody whatsoever. So what this e-visa, when we think about e-visa, we'll think, okay, maybe the immigration officer has access to it. You know, when you scan my passport, somewhere it's linked, because we don't know what to expect. but they still expect you to show something physical. So just if you are coming here and if you have a e-visa, please take all the appropriate screenshots to show, and don't just carry your sort code. You need to have the entire thing, like your face, your date of birth, the country of origin, all the details that are visible on e-visa. I think that's extremely important. And along with the screenshots, if you are in the line, if you have time, log into it and have a copy of it already, because sometimes few of them might want to see your live one, beyond a screenshot. So just be well prepared, like Ankit said. What was really helpful, I think, Ankit, from what you shared, was understanding your group of friends and the power of collective, and not assuming that, like, oh, nobody cares. Because in your case, clearly the university cared and they did something, and that was a really good example. I know that there's a student union and there's some groups, but if it is an Indian student, so what are a couple of these forums that one can get started? Of course, if you're in Leeds, you can comment here and we're happy to support, but elsewhere.
So the group that I'm associated with is called the Students Federation of India, which is a progressive students organization in India, but now we also have a UK branch, SFI UK, and what SFI has been doing has been raising a lot of issues of students with the UK government, or with different universities, or with the Indian government as well. And what we've been able to do is help people with things like visa issues, or give advice about how to get a post-study work visa. And generally, it's been a space where we can talk about issues related to India, have like movie screenings or documentary screenings. So it's a good space to meet like-minded people, but also if there are any challenges that you're facing within the university, or if you're facing any cases of discrimination, SFI can help take that case up and raise the issue with the relevant authorities.
Amazing. I think I remember reading about a student who was unable to pay her tuition on time and was disbarred or something. And then I remember SFI, I think maybe the London chapter, that did something about it. Right? Yeah. All right. So any issues, please look up the chapter. There are a bunch of great and helpful people. Then you also spoke about how you looked at different universities, and you also looked at different departments, and then you looked at what was the kind of work they were doing. So if you had to guide someone, what would the starting point be like? How do we even know what universities exist, where to start? Yeah.
So my starting point, I guess, was because I had spent a year in the UK. I had some sense of which universities I'm interested in.
Right.
And I think it was also the three universities. So I first picked Cambridge because I had already studied there. Correct. And I knew people there. Also picked Oxford because, it has a good Department of Education, and also I was sort of going for the top ranked universities to begin with. And similarly, I also picked UCL.
Right.
Similarly, because it was highly ranked, but also has a good Department of Education.
Got it.
But the fourth university that I picked was not necessarily as highly ranked, but I picked that specifically because my ex-supervisor told me about my current supervisor, who does very relevant work in Leeds. So it was a combination of picking universities based on sort of rankings, but also universities where, there are specific people who are doing work that, aligns with what you want to do.
Right.
And what I would say is, in fact, this is an important balance to keep. I think a lot of people, when they apply, they just look at, the top 5 universities and restrict themselves to that. What I would say is, it's important to, look at people who are doing the kind of work that you want to do.
Agreed.
And not just go by the rankings. And I've honestly been happier about my experience in Leeds than Cambridge.
Yeah. Is it? Nice.
And I think that is partly because I think rankings are not the only way to approach the experience that you're going to have.
True. It also feels more friendly and welcoming and less competitive per se, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Great. So you have revised your proposal and then shortlisted your universities and professors, and then you shot out all these emails.
Yeah.
So what was the next step towards, how do you even find out about these scholarships? Did you have to apply to it separately, or was it all a single application? More about that, please.
So for scholarships, firstly, I looked at scholarships within the universities themselves. So for example, when I'm looking at University of Cambridge, what are scholarships that Cambridge itself offers? So,
Right.
for example, Cambridge offers Cambridge Trust, and then you have departmental scholarships that it offers. You have Gates.
Right.
So at one level, I looked at scholarships within the university and within the department. But then I also looked at your scholarships beyond universities, so which was just like a broader search of looking at
Yeah.
UK PhD scholarships and looking at
Okay.
what are those scholarships that come out. So that's where I came across the White Rose DTP, which is the scholarship that I
Yeah.
am on.
Yeah.
And the scholarship process is also something that kind of you need to prepare for it parallelly. Because a lot of scholarship processes have deadlines before the university deadline. So some of them are quite early, like
Right.
Gates was in December, for example.
Oh, okay.
So that is something that you need to keep in mind. So you need to do the scholarship search early and create a timeline of
Right.
when are these deadlines, when is it due?
Right.
And some scholarships also have multiple rounds. So, for example, the ESRC set of scholarships, which are given by the UK government, the UKRI, they often have multiple rounds. So, you do one application, then you get shortlisted, and you do another application.
Oh, okay.
So, which is why it's important to just have a very clear plan and calendar of
Right.
of these dates.
Right. So yours was ASRC under White Rose.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So how long did your entire application process take, and what did you do first, and what exactly were these 2 rounds of applications like?
So the tricky thing about ESRC is that it's different across all universities.
Is it?
So
Okay.
I applied for the UBEL DTP as part of ESRC for UCL, which had 2 rounds. So I got shortlisted in the first round. Then in the final round, I was on the wait list.
Okay.
But the process in Leeds was very different.
Okay.
So while in the ESRC for UBEL DTP, I could apply directly and then get shortlisted. In Leeds, what I needed to get an admit first, and then I needed to reach out to the department to express my interest in
Right.
ESRC.
Right.
And the department had to nominate me from the university for the scholarship.
Right.
So the application actually went through them. So I shared the application with the department, and then they sort of shared it with ESRC. So again, it's important to keep an idea of what the processes are, because you can't assume that the process will be
The same.
across. Even though ESRC is broadly the same institution, the process differs depending on the cluster of universities.
Right. Yeah, I think just the PhD application in UK itself is so complex and different and like
It is.
highly university and also department specific.
Yes.
Great. So just getting some more details about what the application is. So if you can compare both the UCL and the Leeds application, what did you have to submit in these applications?
For the scholarship. So broadly, the application itself is similar. So a lot of questions about, of course, your proposal itself, but also what is your proposal going to contribute to? So asking you to think about what is the impact that this will have, but also how will you actively contribute to this impact? So, for example, will you, share these findings with the government, or will you publish these findings in some journal? So, sort of asking you to think about where will this research go? What will it actually contribute to? And I think that is one of the main things that they even look at in an application, where they're not just looking at research for research's sake, but also its ability to contribute to society or contribute to an improvement in the problem that you're looking at. But they also had questions about, what are previous courses that you've done, what is your previous education, and a lot of details on like specific courses that you've taken so that they can gauge whether uh, you're eligible for doing like a +3 or a +3.5,
Got it.
or you need to do like a 1+3
Right.
program, depending on what your previous degree was and how closely it covered, research methods.
So they decide for you which
Yes.
type of program.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. But in your case, you already had a master's from the UK. So, like, do they give you any rationale as to why did they still put you in the 1+3 model?
So in my batch, everyone had to do the 1+3, and almost everyone had a master's. I think the rationale is that they are looking at the previous degree. If it is a complete research master's, then you get that exemption. But I think for most people, including me, it was a more thematic master's. So that's the reason they put you in the 1+3.
Okay. I personally have some reservations about the 1-year masters in the UK. But how was your experience like, especially because you've already done a master's from the UK? Yeah.
So I would say it was mixed, and I think it was mixed also because the design of the program was a little funny in the sense that uh, we were a cohort of PhD scholars from across different departments, and the master's was called interdisciplinary.
Right.
And it would have been nice if it was actually that cohort that did all the classes together, and we got to learn from each other, learn about how, let's say, someone in health thinks about an issue, as opposed to someone from, let's say, the transport department. But the design of the masters was such that we were actually in different classes most of the time, in different seminar groups. And as a result, we spent a lot of time with people doing regular master's degrees who are not going on to a PhD. So in that sense, it felt a little isolated. But when I sort of reflect back, I think one big advantage that the masters gave me was getting used to life in the UK. So as opposed to, someone who just comes here on day one, you need to start working on your PhD, but deal with the cold, do grocery shopping,
everything is different.
And which takes you a good, I would say, 4-5 months to
easily
to get used to.
And then the season changes and it's all new.
So that, I think that time was a luxury, I think, to just get used to the rhythm of life here. So in that sense, I would say it was
that completely makes sense. In my case, mine is also kind of a 1+3 model, but the first year is not a complete master's. So we only have to do about 60 credits worth of modules, and we can pick and choose which ones we want. So I did like research methods and gender and globalization, which were extremely relevant to my topic. And I had so much time during that entire first year to just keep developing on this research proposal. So in your case, you said you already had a good idea of your research proposal. So did that change or evolve in the last 1 year, or there's more space for it now, starting now?
I think it did evolve over the past year as well, because I tried to do things that were related to my proposal and the assignments that I had to write, or the dissertation that I had to work on. So I think it's definitely evolved because I've spent much more time working on it, and I think it is still evolving very much. So what I would tell people is also that the proposal, I think, is meant to establish that you have an idea of how research works, and you broadly have an interesting problem in mind, but it is going to change, and that's something that one should sort of bear in mind as you go for a PhD.
No, this is all extremely helpful. Thank you so much, Ankit. I think just a couple of questions. If you could cover a bit about funding as well. Although this is fully funded scholarship, in my experience, we still have to pay a lot just to get here. And we're also then compromising on the income back home, and the stipend is like barely enough for us to get by. So just if you could take us through what were some of these funding realities and challenges like for you, and how can we best prepare for it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair question because I think the stipend that we get here, if we convert that into rupees, it might sound like a much
Yeah.
larger amount, but in reality, like you said, uh, it is difficult to survive on the stipend, especially if you're used to a certain type of life back in India. And also, I think it's important to keep in mind that there are a lot of starting expenses. So, of course, there is the massive visa costs and the IHS fees.
Right.
And the IHS fees keep increasing every year.
Yeah.
As well. So, for people who are planning to apply next year, I think there's a chance that it might rise even further.
Yeah.
So one is you need to be prepared for having, I think, about 5 to 7 lakhs to start with, even before your stipend kicks in, so that you are able to pay the IHS fees, but also you might need to pay a deposit for the flat.
True.
There are a lot of things that you will need to buy in the first month.
Yeah.
So the out-of-pocket expenditure initially will be substantial.
Yeah.
And even within the stipend, I think you'll need to be fairly frugal with your expenses. So I think
True.
I think it's a mental preparation, especially for people who, let's say, are coming in with a lot of work experience.
Yeah.
And who have been used to a certain quality of life in India. I think mentally you need to prepare yourself that the life will not be the same. You might not have the same luxuries within the stipend.
Yeah.
But I would say after a point, after 3 or 4 months, I think once things settle down and you have spent those initial expenses, it does get easier.
Yeah.
And I think you also figure out, ways to save money or ways to save costs.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the first 4 or 5 months are quite difficult.
Yeah. True. No, that's a helpful indicator. So start saving about 5 to 7 lakh, and like you said, it may increase. So anything around that figure, just to prepare ourselves. Could you also give some more information about your ESRC scholarship details? In my case, I think the one thing that I really like about the scholarship was we came in to Leeds at like mid-September, and by 1st October I had my stipend already. So it was really nice that they were giving it as an advance rather than towards the end of the month, which really helped us with a lot of costs initially. Right. So is it the same with you, and what is the funding like, and what different categories of funding do you get under this scholarship?
So we get the stipend at the end of the month, so the last Friday of the month. And the stipend currently is £1,600 per month, which increased slightly from the previous year. But for the next year, I think the news just came in that it's going to increase fairly substantially. So I think for people applying next year, it's estimated to be about £1,730.
Okay. Do you think they'll increase ours also? I think they will.
Yeah, I think all the UK ones are the same. So I think that's good news for people who are applying next year. Yeah. In addition to the stipend, we have the opportunity to apply to something called a research training support grant, which is £800 per year, and which essentially covers things like conferences that you want to go to, or any research training that you might want to avail. Okay. And you get that in your first year and second year of your PhD. You don't get it in the writing up year. Okay. But in the first 2 years, you get that. Okay. Which is quite helpful because the conferences here are quite expensive. In terms of the fees. So it's a good opportunity for you to actually attend conferences in the UK and meet people. There is also a grant which you can apply to for fieldwork. So you can get an additional fieldwork support grant, and the amount I think is about £1,200 or so, or 1,500, and I think it depends on what you are asking money for. So it's not that you'll get the whole amount, but it depends on.
But that's not a lot for fieldwork.
It's not a lot.
That'll barely cover your cost if you're doing your fieldwork in India. I mean, your flight costs and stuff. Yeah. Okay. No, this is all extremely helpful. Thank you so much for sharing all of this essential information. I was just looking at some of the information out there to just see what kind of data is out there. And I realized that the lived experiences of scholars are extremely limited, and which is what prompted me to start this as well. So this is extremely valuable, and thank you so much for sharing. Before we go, do you have any other final tips or advice? And how do you see yourself using your PhD skills in your work in future?
Yeah, I would just say for people who want to apply for a PhD, I would say the most important thing is understanding why you want to do this. And the reason to do it should be very individual in nature. It should not be something that uh, your friends are doing, or it should not be something that you feel is conventionally the reason to do a PhD. I think it's very important that one is clear about your own reason for
Yeah.
wanting to do this, because it's a difficult journey, and unless that reason is strong enough, and it's your own reason, it's not something that's
True.
being pushed onto you, it will be very difficult uh, to do it. So, and for me personally, I think the way I will use it is probably, one is I'm already probably relearning a lot of things. I think having worked for so long in the same space, there is a certain degree of arrogance, I would admit, that creeps in, where you get a sense that you know about the problem, and you know about the solution.
Yeah.
So I think it's sort of relearning and rethinking a lot of things that I've probably taken for granted with regard to my field.
Yeah.
And I think in the future, it's essentially, I honestly don't know whether I'll go back to the space or work in academia. But I think whatever I do, I think I'm going in with a fresh set of ideas with different perspectives. So I think that is what I'll take back from the PhD, hopefully.
Amazing. That all sounds so refreshing, and all the best to you in your journey. And thank you so much for taking out time. Thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget to check out the other videos where we've also covered similar topics and also more insights on personal journeys that you won't get anywhere else. Stay tuned and see you in the next episode.